Good morning, everyone. So nice to be here, and it was an honor to be invited. So thanks to the organizers. I teach mathematics in a Finnish university, and I'm really passionate about developing teaching and experimenting with new teaching methods. And I also do research in education. In particular, I do research in self-assessment. The title of my talk today is Learning for Yourself, Not for the Teacher. And I'd like to start with talking about what it means to learn for yourself. If we want our students to learn for themselves, what kind of skills should they be learning? So what kind of skills do they need for their life? And in order to dig into that, I would like to activate you a little bit. You were already activated, but let's continue. So now pick someone else. You talk to one person, pick another person sitting next to you, or behind you, or in front of you, and introduce yourself to that person. Thank you. I have to say, you are very good at talking to other people. Thank you. Very nice. Now, here is my question to you. Discuss with that other person. What are the most important skills you've needed in your professional life? So what are the core skills you've needed in your working life? And perhaps pick one skill. What's the most important? And then we have a Slido. Could you please type your answers into Slido so that we can all see them? Thank you. Looks very good. Let's continue. If you still want to type in your answers, that's fine. Can we keep the Slido, please, for just a moment? So communication seems to be really important. There's empathy, active listening, adaptation, analytical skills, teamwork. There's something in Estonian, muutustega kohanemine, is that like adapting to changes? Yeah. And kuulamine, is that listening? Yeah, great. I enjoy this so much. Suhtlemine, I don't know. Oh. What? Communicating? No, yeah. Problem solving, thinking, excellent. Now we can go back to my slides. I will show you what Finnish university alumni say about this, and we can compare. So they were asked 5 years after graduation, what skills are the most important in working life for them. Number one is ability to learn new things, so like adaptation and learning new things. Next one is ability to regulate own actions. The next one is problem solving, that was also mentioned by you. Cooperation skills. I haven't translated everything, I'm sorry about that, but I think most of you can probably guess many of these things. Analytical skills is before cooperation skills. Ability to endure stress, organization skills, creativity. Then there's English language. And number 12 is theoretical knowledge in one's own field. So I want to point out it is there, but it's not in the top 10. Now, if we look at teaching in universities, so I'm a mathematician, my background is in mathematics, and I won't be talking about mathematics here today. It will be like, what I say can be applied to any discipline, but I want to show you where I come from. This is traditional mathematics teaching in universities. There's lectures, and then you go home and do homework by yourself, and then there's a homework session where students take turns in showing their solutions on the blackboard or whiteboard, and assessment is always exam in the end. And if you compare this with the skills you just listed, and I showed you, like, the contradiction is so big. What skills do students learn in traditional university teaching? They learn theoretical knowledge. They might learn some problem solving, but mostly memorizing, I would say. And at least in mathematics, hardly any communication or cooperation skills. What kind of practices do students take in? Are they authentic in any way? Well, the students sit in a lecture for several hours per week, and they work alone. And what is assessed? Theoretical knowledge, nothing else. And there was that huge list of things. Theoretical knowledge was there, but it was number 12. Now, I can definitely say that this applies to traditional mathematics teaching, but I dare to say that this applies to many, many other disciplines too, at least most of these things. So, what we should be doing, we should be teaching students skills that are important to them in the future. And actually, a lot of development here has happened in recent years. What I showed you in my previous slide, that was traditional mathematics teaching or traditional university teaching. So that has started to change. But we also need to assess those skills that the students need. We shouldn't be assessing only theoretical knowledge, but other skills too. And that has not changed. It seems to be really difficult to change assessment. Today, I will tell you a couple of examples of how we've tried to change the assessment culture in universities with my colleagues. But since assessment should be viewed as a part of the learning environment, I will start by describing the learning environment we have. So first the learning environment and then assessment. In 2011, we started to use and develop the so-called extreme apprenticeship method. This is a Finnish method developed or created in Finland. And the core idea is that the students participate in activities that resemble those of experts. It's based on cognitive apprenticeship. So if you think about, say, a shoemaker, the shoemaker has a workshop and the apprentices work there and they learn from the more skilled ones and they learn gradually how to make a shoe. We take that same idea into learning cognitive skills. Why is it extreme? Well, one reason is that this method scales up. I've had 400 and once I had 600 students in my course. And a couple of snapshots of the teaching method. I would say this is the most important part of the teaching method. We have a collaborative learning space when the students can come, work with each other, and they can stay there as long as they need to, so they get individual support. And there are tutors who scaffold the students' work. The tutors, they are undergraduate or graduate students. So the tutors, they are almost peers to the learners. So they speak the same language with the learners, and they remember very well what's difficult when you're learning a new thing. The idea is not giving answers to the students. It's more about asking questions and listening to the students. And the tutors, they model how experts work. If you don't know how to start solving a problem, what do? Where can you find information? If you get stuck, how can you get over that? This picture is from my previous workplace. This is from Helsinki. We had a really nice learning environment there. It was the main hallway of the department. And it meant that it was in the middle of everything, and everybody walked past that learning environment. So it was really easy for the students to stop by, sit down, start working with their peers. And the tutors, they were there and supported the students' work, but also the professors walked by all the time. So there was this natural interaction between the professors and the students. And there was really a sense of community. People saw each other, and people saw each other doing mathematics. And mathematics was everywhere. You could draw on the tables, you could draw on the walls. So the community was visible to everyone. It was accessible to everyone. And the results of this, they were really nice. If you compare the extreme apprenticeship method with traditional lecture-based teaching, we noticed that the quality of learning was better. Students felt more competent, which is really important for you to learn new things. There was more deep learning in the extreme apprenticeship method than in lecture-based teaching, so the students really wanted to learn for themselves. And there was less memorization and fragmented learning. Sounds good, doesn't it? So what we tried, and where we succeeded quite well, was making a student-centered learning environment, low hierarchies, authentic practices, and students learn skills that are relevant to real life, such as collaboration, seeking for information, creativity. But what happened in the end of the course? What did I do to my students? There was an exam, so I drove them like a herd of animals to an auditorium where they sat for 2 hours, and in those 2 hours they had to show what they know by writing it with pen and paper. There was stress and panic in the air. And if you think about all our aims, like, was that student-centered? No, low hierarchies. No, it was all about the teacher having power over the whole assessment process. Authentic practices, no, there are no exams in real life, really, usually. Students learn skills that are relevant to real life, no. So everything else in the learning environment was aimed at all these goals, but assessment was somehow in contradiction with all that. Talking about authentic practices, now I would like to hear from you. What are authentic assessment practices? Think about, and you can discuss with your peer, think about a situation in which your skills have been assessed recently. So how have you been assessed recently? How were your skills assessed? What was the assessment method? So go on, chat with your peer and then typing your answers to Slido. What was the assessment method? Thank you. Thank you. You can keep on typing, but let's continue the conversation. Test. Oh, it seems like test might actually be an authentic way of assessment. May I ask, like the tests, written tests, examinations, in what kind of situation have you taken tests recently? Yeah. Okay, oh, yeah, okay, so a test about hygiene, yeah, I see, yeah. Other than that, yeah. A language test. Yeah, I haven't taken a test in... The last test I took was 2009, I think. This also makes me think that maybe we don't always recognize all the situations where we are assessed or where we assess ourselves. So maybe I'm starting... Oh, by the way, I was really nervous about this question. I had no idea what would come up. And I think it might also be quite a difficult question. And your answers make me think that maybe we equate assessment with exams. When we think about assessment, we might automatically think about exams and tests, even though there are other assessment methods too. Reflection is there, oral feedback, and then there was self-assessment and presentation, students' feedback. And I saw peer assessment. I think I saw it. It was there. And also dog. It's so cute. If I think about my own work, there's definitely peer assessment. I get feedback on my scientific articles from peers. My supervisor assesses me. We have an assessment discussion once a year, but mostly it's about self-assessment. And I do that all the time without even noticing it, I think. But yeah, interesting. Visual assessment of skills. Teaching. So teaching someone is assessment for you. Did I understand that correctly? Yeah. Maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, so reflection is there, and reflection is what we decided to choose for our assessment practice. Can I have back the slides? Oh, feedback, I didn't... While I was speaking, you started to type in new things. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, going back to what we did in our assessment. Why was it so difficult for me to change the assessment method? I changed everything else in my course, but didn't change the assessment. Well, one reason was that I had 400 students in my course, so it felt really risky to start doing something new. And also I felt that the exam was a guarantee that my students knew enough. So I have to be in control of the situation and make sure that if a student passes my course, they know certain things. At the same time, I knew that assessment drives learning. Whatever I do in the end of the course will affect everything the students do during the course. If I have an exam, they will study for that exam. Now, traditional assessment exams have many drawbacks. First of all, there's exam stress. Students, they report that exams cause them a lot of stress. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a problem. Yeah. But there are some problems in it. And there's bulimic learning. Students learn things right before the test, and after the test, they've forgotten everything. Also, the students, instead of learning the theoretical knowledge that is tested in the exam, they might learn exam strategies, how to do well in an exam. And finally, it's surprisingly difficult to produce a fair exam. We might think that exams are objective, but they are not. And we might think that grading an exam is objective, but it's not. I saw a study where teachers were shown how they've graded exams, and the teachers were surprised to see what they've been doing. They thought they were objective, but looking back, they were not. So there are all these problems, and at the same time, like I said, assessment. Assessment is one of the most important individual factors that affect on how our students are studying. It's been said that if tobacco smoking was invented today, it would not be permitted. And I say, if our current assessment regime was invented today, would that be permitted? I really love this analogy because it was so difficult to get rid of the exams. Oh, by the way, I think I lost the slides from my monitors. Thank you. Now we'll see how well I know my slides. Yeah, so it was so difficult to get rid of the exams. Like, I wanted to do it. I wanted to get rid of the exams. I didn't want to have them, but I didn't know how to let go. And once I managed to do it, I haven't done any exams to my students in several years, but every once in a while I think, oh, should I go back? Maybe it is the best way of assessing my students. Now, my problem was that I was only thinking about assessment of learning, when instead we should think about assessment for learning. The assessment should help the students to improve. The assessment should improve student learning. And even further, we should have assessment as learning. So assessment has a dual purpose. It's an opportunity for learning to the students, and it also measures their learning. And the students should have an active and reflective role in their learning. And with this idea in mind, we chose self-assessment to be the assessment method that replaced the exam. I'm not saying this is the only solution, this was our solution, and let's see how it worked out. Self-assessment, it has a very important role in lifelong learning. It is the core component of lifelong learning. When our students, when they graduate and they go into doing their life, there will be no exams or someone who will also always assess them. They need to be able to assess their own skills in order to learn and improve. Now, before I go any further, explaining what we did, I want to give you some context. I'm from Finland. In Finland, the teachers have full autonomy regarding the teaching and assessment method. So I can do whatever I want in my teaching, and I can do whatever I want with the assessment. Also, assessment in Finland is low stakes. So the students, they can take exams multiple times, and the exams don't play a big role in further studies or in getting a job. I'm not saying that the students don't care about their grades, because they do, but it's still, it's low stakes, which gave me more freedom to start experimenting. So we created the digital self-assessment model, DISA. And it's based on rubrics. You don't need to be able to read that, don't worry. It's mathematics, so you probably don't understand it. This is a master's degree course called Algebra 2. But the point is, in the rubric, there's content knowledge. But in the rubric, there's also generic skills. For example, here is mathematical discussion and collaboration. And this was so good. Finally, I was able to assess all those skills that are relevant to the students. on top of theoretical knowledge. So I could include cooperation, communication, feedback skills, whatever I wanted, whatever was taught in my course. I mean, of course, you also need to take care of teaching these skills to the students. And I was doing that, but I wasn't assessing it, but now I was able to assess it. Here is part of a rubric in a mathematics course. This is communication and collaboration. This is just part of the rubric. So there are 3 different skills. I've put here basic skills, intermediate skills, and advanced skills. And below the skills are described. For example, basic skills means that if I don't understand what another person says, I ask them to explain again. And I collaborate with other people, listen to them, and share my ideas with them. And each level builds on the previous one. So in order to have intermediate skills, you also need to have the basic skills. And in order to have advanced skills, you need to have intermediate skills and basic skills. Now you might think, oh, I'm not sure if those are actually important skills in communication and collaboration. And it should be noted that generic skills are always specific to a certain subject. So these skills are specific to mathematics. So we can't have like generic skills. They are always tied into a context. But let's not worry about that too much. But I just wanted to give you a disclaimer. The idea was like expressing in a concrete way what it means to have basic, intermediate, or advanced communication and collaboration skills. Write that down in a way a student can understand and in a way that helps the student to assess their own skills. And now I would like you to try self-assessment. What is your level? And more importantly, how do you know that that is your level? How do you justify your choice? You can talk with your peer and discuss what's your level. Please, go on. Thank you. It's nice that you are so good at talking to other people and keeping up a discussion. Hopefully you took other people's positions and feelings into account when talking to that person, listen to their ideas and so on. So that was just to demonstrate to you what I ask my students to do. Usually they do this in writing, but they could do that also by. But sometimes sometimes I make my students to also discuss with their peers about their assessments. Now let me give you examples how we've implemented self-assessment and how we've used the rubrics I just showed you. I've got three examples. Example number 1. During a course, the students practice self-assessment. So, for example, every week I make the students do a small self-assessment exercise, like the one you just did. So I might ask them, I might give them one topic of the course, think about your skills in this topic, and here's the rubric. What are your skills and how do you know that? And in the end of the course, I asked my students to take all their weekly reflections, or weekly self-assessments, and write a longer reflection of the learning process and their skills. And I grade those reflections. I don't care about the accuracy. Is the self-assessment like exactly correct or not? I care about the reflection. What's the quality of the reflection? What's the deepness of the reflection? And why do we do this? Why do I do this? Firstly, it's about noticing, so that the students would notice their own skills. When you're learning something new, it can be quite frustrating. For example, when you're taking a course, you learn something new all the time. All the time you're feeling, I can't quite do this, I can't quite do this, and you don't realize that you've actually learned a lot of things already. So going back to the learning objectives of the course, looking at the rubric, you see that I know this thing and I know that thing. I don't know that thing yet, but I have all these skills already. And when the students, when they look at their weekly self-assessments in the end of the course, they notice their development. In the end of the course, I couldn't do this thing, but actually now it's quite easy for me. And finally, the students learn to verbalize their own skills when they write their reflection. And here's an example of the self-assessment assignment I give to my students. For each of the topics in the rubric, use the following as your guiding questions. What kind of development has taken place? What do you know? What don't you know? How do you know that you master or do not master a skill? And what has helped you learn the skills? Often the students, when they justify how they know a certain skill, they might talk about the learning environment, the external factors, like the weekly tasks, how well did they do in those tasks, did the tasks feel easy or not? Or they might talk about other people, like their peers. I was able to explain this thing to my peers, so that's why I know, I understand it. Or they might talk about their inner emotions. I feel that I know this. Or when I understand something, I just feel things going into right places, click inside me. And about verbalizing your own skills, that's actually a very important skill in life. Again, here are Finnish alumni telling that for them, ability to verbalize one's own skills has been the most important factor in getting employed. And there's also research to support this. So it's important to teach our students how to talk about their skills, how to tell another person what they know and what they can do. And it's quite difficult for the students before they've had a chance to practice it. Example number 2. Students do self-assessment exercises during a course, so the same thing as before. But now, there's a one-on-one assessment discussion with a teacher in the middle of the course and in the end of the course. And in the end, there is no exam, students give their own grades. Why like this? Well, the assessment discussion is about providing feedback to the students on their self-assessment so that they can improve their self-assessment skills. So we are not expecting that the students know how to assess themselves because they don't know. They have to have an opportunity to learn how to do it. And in order to learn something, you need feedback. Also, the students are heard. In those assessment discussions, I usually start by asking how the students are doing, how they are feeling about their studies, and then they start telling quite personal things to me. And I get to know my students and their problems. Maybe it's not about assessment at all. but it really helps me to teach my students better. And also it gives the students a feeling that someone cares about them. And students give their own grades, and they have ownership of their learning. Of course, if you have a lot of students, you can't have this. You can't have one-on-one discussions with every student. So we developed something else for larger courses. So students do self-assessment exercises, but now we've developed this digital DISA tool that gives the feedback to the students. The tool compares the course, the work the student has done during the course, all the completed tasks, and it compares those completed tasks to the student's self-assessment and gives feedback. And the students give their own grades in the end of the course. Now, the teacher can intervene if student self-assessment doesn't align at all with the work they had done. Intervening doesn't mean that the student has done the self-assessment incorrectly, but it means that the computer can't check everything, so in some cases the teacher has to dig into that, see if the student's self-assessment makes sense, and if it doesn't, then have a discussion with the student. So in large classes, digital tools can take some of the role of the teacher in giving feedback to the students. Our results. We divided students into two groups. It was the same course. Half the students did the DISA self-assessment and half of them did an exam in the end. The ones who did the self-assessment in the end, they had higher levels of deep learning, so they really wanted to understand what they study. They wanted to make connections between the different topics of the course, build the big picture. And the students felt that they study for themselves. So the students who did the DISA self-assessment felt that they were studying for themselves. Here are some student comments. Now I didn't focus on memorizing things. Instead, I focused on understanding the topic so that in the future, if necessary, I can use them or relearn them quickly. I think there wasn't any bulimic learning. I remember the content better. So here the students talk about the quality of learning, how self-assessment affected their learning. The exam measures just content knowledge. In self-assessment, also other kinds of skills are considered. So in self-assessment, you can include any kind of skills you want, like I explained earlier, and here we see that also the students notice that. Wild hippie vibes. Not all the students appreciate self-assessment. They might have concerns towards self-assessment. Some of them say it's weird. They don't want to do it. It might be intimidating to them. And that's why it's important to communicate to the students why we do this. The students, they appreciate learning gains, and they appreciate learning skills important for them in the future. And some students, they might feel that they don't have the skills needed for self-assessment. And that's why it's important to give them tools that help them in doing the self-assessment, such as the rubrics, or providing feedback on their self-assessments and giving them an opportunity to improve their self-assessment skills. And also the students, they care a lot about the accuracy of the assessment method. They want the assessment method to measure their skills. So it's important to communicate to the students that self-assessment is not about guessing your grade, but it's a process that actually tells you about your skills. It's important to communicate that to the students, but also it's important to make sure that the self-assessment method you are using, it's not about the students just, oh, I think here I have the best grade, and here maybe not, I don't know. It's not about guessing. It's a complicated process, and the students, you need to build the structures that support the students in doing that. And finally, the last comments. When I was doing those self-assessment tasks, I felt like now I'm finally studying for myself. If I'm studying for an exam, I often feel like now I'm studying for that exam, and for the fact that I would get a good grade. Now I felt more like I would have been learning to be able to use these skills in the future. So there was ownership of learning, ownership of assessment, and also learning skills that are important to the student. Now, am I saying we should ban exams altogether? I am not saying we should ban exams. If I go to see my doctor, I want to see a doctor who has taken exams and passed them. But I also want to see a doctor who is very good at assessing their own skills. I know them to know, I want the doctor to know when they know something and when they do not know something. And actually, self-assessment skills, they are quite important in medical education, so they want to take care of this thing when educating future doctors. Right, so my concluding remarks. Self-assessment skills are important in life. So the students need to be taught self-assessment skills. It helps them to study better, and they are important in lifelong learning. But the students need to have an opportunity to practice those self-assessment skills. Sometimes I hear teachers saying, oh, I can't do self-assessment with my students because some of them will overestimate themselves and some of them will underestimate themselves. That is not a reason for not doing self-assessment. That is why you should do self-assessment. If the students don't know how to assess themselves, you need to help them learn it because it's an important skill. The students should have ownership over their assessment, not only the teacher. And finally, if we only use teacher-led evaluation, it can solidify students' belief that they are not capable of assessing their own learning. Thank you very much.
Very much for sharing your experience and your work and how you are doing some steps to improve learning for the learners. I see that the participants have been so engaged that there's almost no questions, but there are a few. So we still have time, you can type in. When I was working through your slides, I had them before, and a couple of times, I think the first question that popped is the role of professor, or even you, because you have created a little bit different culture for assessment. So what has it mean for your own professional practice? What have you, I don't know, learned or maybe even unlearned as a professor, as a lecturer?
By doing self-assessment?
Yes.
Very good question, and quite a difficult one.
Take your time.
Yeah. The first time I did self-assessment with my students, that was a small class, like 15 or 20 students. And it was like feeling that we form a community together. Like that was a mathematics course, so I felt that we form a community of mathematicians, and that felt great. Yeah. So somehow it removed some of the hierarchies and also made the students work like mathematicians do. like experts do.
But you are not alone in it. You have a team. Like how many other professors are involved, and maybe also like how have you together kind of created meaning for self-assessment, and how you onboarded your colleagues?
I'm really glad you pointed that out. When I started doing this, well, there was another person, a colleague of mine, and we discussed, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think he suggested self-assessment. He's like, no, let's ditch everything we've done. Let's do something new. Let's do self-assessment. So yeah, there were two of us, but not many more. So yeah. And I mean, like mathematics, it's really traditional. And what is also important was that the head of our department, he accepted it. I told him what I'm going to do, and he said, yes, this sounds good, and do your experiment, divide the students into 2 groups, and that sounds like great research. But yeah, I've had other colleagues coming to my door and saying, what are you doing with the students? So like it's been mixed, but it's important to have someone who will like collaborate with you, and it's important to have your supervisors.
Yeah, kind of leadership support in doing that. But of course, this example of engaging students in the self-assessment, but we also have one question like, but how do you know if they have learned the mathematics? And is there a way, like other assessment methods, how they present this? So is there a way, like other assessment methods, how they present this? So how do they present that they have learned mathematics? How do you know that they actually learn mathematics?
Well, first I have to say that if I read their exam answers, I don't know if they've learned the mathematics. I know what they've written there, but I mean, like you can memorize stuff. You can learn how to write something that looks good without really understanding it. So I don't think any assessment method really tells us what the students actually know. But in order to provide the students high quality feedback on their skills, including mathematics skills, I need to work with my students. So I need to see what they are doing. It might mean that I talk to them while they are working. It might mean that I read their coursework. So yeah, I need some information on my students' learning in order to give them feedback on their self-assessment, and that might happen through vocal interaction or by reading their work.
There's always this question, like the learners and how well they know themselves to assess themselves. So there's a question around. I tried to also translate it in English, so that self-assessment is also subjective, and a lot depends on for example, personal traits. So some of them modest and maybe not so sure of themselves might give a little bit like lower self-assessment, and some can be more like self-assured. Like how do you kind of support that it's really like adequate and it's kind of really kind of objective on that place, so we don't like underestimate our development?
No, I would say that now we again come back to the feedback. So the students need feedback on their self-assessment, so that they can like adjust their self-assessments.
Few people, like some have liked this question, so I ask it. So are there more students choosing your courses now since you dropped the traditional assessment? Is mathematics becoming so popular that everybody comes to study it?
Well, yeah. I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage. Yeah, so it makes the courses more appealing to the students, but the students might come there and think like, oh, self-assessment, I will give myself the best grade, but then they realize that it doesn't work like that, so that they actually have to justify and have some evidence about their assessments.
I'm also curious. So there was a question about skepticism from colleagues. A little bit talked on that. Do you use AI giving feedback? If then, how? AI.
Oh, yeah, a great question. That is what we're going to do next.
Okay.
So using AI in providing feedback to the students is something we would like to do. And also using AI to help the teachers, for example, in designing the rubrics might be interesting.
Yeah, that's also one of my questions, like what are your aspirations? But you already, so AI involvement, anything else that you kind of want to change in your practice?
One thing I would like to learn more about are the self-assessment processes that happen in students. So what do the students actually do when they assess themselves? What do they think? What kind of information they use? Learning more about that would help us in supporting the students' self-assessment process. So then we could give better instructions for the students so that they could do the self-assessment.
Yeah, I think maybe you also a little bit answer to one of the comments, questions, that actually self-assessment takes time, skills and effort. So one is that you actually have to learn it, which you actually do it also during the course. And what are your thoughts regarding how to avoid that self-assessment becomes a formality where you quickly write down some buzzwords? How to ensure self-assessment is deep and meaningful?
An excellent question. And if you have a small class of students, it's easier to take care of the quality of the self-assessment because then you can talk with your students. In a bigger class, I would say it's important to motivate to the students why we do self-assessment. That it helps you learn better, it helps you study better, and it's important to you in the future. And also making the self-assessment tasks meaningful to the students.
So authentic aspect of the assessment. There was a number of feedback comments from students, like how it was beneficial. Were there other voices as well? I don't know, voices of concern, some so that it's still difficult or challenging. Can you maybe bring out something from that kind of feedback as well? Because I think that's also relevant. It's not like everybody likes it right away.
No, students are concerned whether they can do self-assessment. And they are also, some students think that an exam measures their skills better. And some students, they just have a preference towards exams. They like exams. They like being challenged in an exam. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Johanna, for in a way inviting us into the theme of assessment and self-assessment, and later you will also join the panel, so there are still, if some questions remain, can be asked there as well. But let's give a big thank you for Johanna.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you can have a rest, take some coffee, and then later on we will be together on the stage again.